call this meeting to order. Parks Commission, January 5th, 2023. And our first order of business is our approval of minutes for December 2022. A motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes. I'll note to the commission, I did send a couple of suggested edits to Scott in advance. Those are incorporated into here already. And I forgot to mention in earlier meetings, what I've been doing recently is when I send my suggested edits to Scott, I've also been sending it to our chairperson, Sue, in case Sue, what, you didn't see it?
I've never gotten any. We'll talk about that later. That's.
Oh, well, I thought.
Yeah.
Because I have your email address. On the idea, as I hoped, that Sue could review it, comment, challenge, edit, whatever, add anything to it that she wanted, and I was taking it that you had no objections or anything, but I guess we've got a conversation.
They're so great.
So no other changes to the minutes as we see them in the packet.
All right. Is there a second? As written, or are there any other additions or comments on the minutes? Okay. A second?
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor of the minutes as written?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Do we have public appearances for non-agenda items? I do not see that we do. Review and approve our agenda. A motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda. We have no one in the audience here. We have one person on Zoom, which is for the first agenda item anyway, right?
Yes.
So as written then.
A second on the agenda is written?
Second.
Is that Sarah Schroeder? Okay. Those in favor of the agenda as proposed?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda is approved as written. 5A is the conditional use, CU 4288-22, request by Michael Zulke, agent for Engberg Anderson, to obtain a conditional use to allow a decrease in setbacks for the proposed Hub Parks development at 2220 Traceway Drive. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I see that. Sarah Schroeder. And is there a oh, excuse me.
I'll second.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
I'll second.
Got it. Thank you, Chris. Okay, Scott.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sue. I will introduce Mike Zulke. He's on the call. He is the lead engineer from Engberg for this project. And the item before you is actually a conditional use with the setback. It's close to the road, if you would, and this conditional use is a conditional use allowed in this zoning district. So we're working on that, or that's the item before you, and along with there is included in the packet. Typically, what happens with this type of a project, it runs through the staff. And then staff provides comments. And then actually the Plan Commission did approve this conditional use with some conditions, which are really, I would recommend that the Park Commission, at the end of the day would approve it with the same conditions. I will report that the conditions that were indicated by Planning Department, we did have a meeting with Plesco today, so we're looking to we're moving towards resolution of those requests and those conditions. And again, I'm not going to ask Mike to kind of roll through this whole project, if you would, but certainly if there's any questions that the Park Commission may have at this point, we are currently on hold. We're looking to go to the next step of construction document production by Engberg, but engineering wanted to make sure that these these conditions and these items were taken care of before we continued on with the construction document being put together.
Any questions from the members?
I guess when you say on hold, are you implying a sort of a hold-up problem?
Yep, there's a couple conditions listed by the Plan Commission. One is there needs to be a on the plat, there's a parking lot easement that needs to be vacated. There's also a storm sewer thing that needs to be resolved so that the site can be clean, if you would, so before we begin to start to build on it. So we're working on getting those conditions met so that we can then, ask Enberg to continue on with the production of the construction documents.
I suppose in the engineering view of this, if, in the worst case, something doesn't go through like they want, then they got to suddenly work around it somehow or other.
Well,
We want to get it cleared first and then.
Yep, before we build anything, we want to make sure that it's a clean plat.
Well, even drawing plans.
Well, but we're kind of past that stage. It was discovered when Tracy was out of the office for a bit, and then when she got back, she discovered it. So she says, "Hey, we got to make sure these things are cleaned up before we can continue on with the project."
And so before, if Mr. Zulke has anything he'd like to tell us, but I want just one question of you, Scott. When you introduced or discussed this initially, you said that you're thinking the Parks Commission's approval should be with the wording should include with the conditions of the Plan Commission?
Correct.
So, okay, the motion is just currently proposed as the exact wording of the action item,
But approved with
conditions.
with conditions offered by the Plan Commission.
Okay, all right. Mr. Zulke, what would you like to tell us?
I think, well, first, thank you for having us here tonight. Rob Stein from EOR, who is the landscape engineer or architect, is here as well.
Okay.
So I think, as Scott mentioned, we are just finishing up with design development stage, and we went for our architectural design review application at that time just to get some more feedback before we got too far down the road. So I think that worked out pretty well. And then, the storm that was on there, we had known about that storm. We were trying to find solutions to that storm. And it kind of came to a point where, and the parking lot setback was something that we did not know about until later. But we came into agreement with Scott and Tracy Foss about kind of putting this on hold so we don't go too far down the road and do work that's, potentially may not happen. So everything up until that point is progressing along pretty well. We are on our targeted budget from our DD estimate, so we feel pretty comfortable moving forward when some of these issues get resolved. But if there's any other questions on kind of our design to this standpoint, we understand that there is some work left to do. And I think you saw in the packet that there was an option to two different site plans. The second one had raised the building up 2'4". And the genesis of that is when we were getting into the grading, or Rob's team realized how much cut of the site was going to have to be taken off to make sure that south entrance was kind of flat with Traceway. And so by doing that, we came up with a new solution, which I think has a lot of positives that I outlined in the letter to do that by raising it up a little bit. So with that, we create a stair and a ramp and make that front entrance accessible. The back entrance off the parking lot will remain accessible at that point. And we think it's just a better design. Sometimes you take a step back to get a better design at this point. But what that will also do in the front is it'll take any of that traffic coming out will then kind of proceed towards the east, and with our 8-foot sidewalk that's in front and bike traffic comes through there, we feel that's a nice separation to avoid any kind of accidents or incidents in that way. The 2'4" dimension seems kind of weird, but what we want to do is there's a door on the west side that leads into the bathrooms, and a door on the east side that comes out of the meeting room. And what we wanted to do was make sure that we had an accessible slope from the sidewalk up to these doors without having a handrail on there. So that's why we came up with the 2'4" in that direction. But so I think once we move forward, we feel this is a really good solution. And I think things are really kind of coming together, you know, with help from input from all different types of people.
Okay, Heidi Reynolds has a question.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if this matters or not, and if you've already stated this, I apologize for not hearing it. So it's a proposed community building. Is this specifically for the neighborhood there, or is this something that the public at large would be able to utilize?
And I will let Scott answer it, but I can kind of throw my 2 cents in there. And I think, you know, being part of that Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, I think, and where it's at, I think the idea is that it is kind of for this neighborhood, but because it's in this neighborhood doesn't mean it's just exclusive for that neighborhood. And I would see this kind of as this kind of public building at that point. And, you know, there is some discussions about having polling here, but I think this is the approach here is really that it is a multi-use type of space that you can separate a couple of meeting rooms there, you can open them up, but it becomes part of the park as well for both the bike track and the playground and the, you know, the basketball courts to the west side as well. But I can also let Scott kind of elaborate on that if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, it is classified as a community park, Heidi, if you would. So it's certainly, you know, community parks form or provide different options. They provide an area park for the residents along with a neighborhood park, but certainly it's available for the whole community with rental space and those types of things.
Any other questions? Anything about? I don't see anything about the setback that's controversial. And that's our specific question here, but is there any question at all from any other members?
Yeah.
Patrick,
Yeah. Regarding, well, sort of related to the setback and then raising the building elevation, as I'm understanding, this is because the actual site there, let's say, is lower at the south at Traceway, and then it goes in uphill sort of, or higher elevation to the north?
That is correct. Yeah, it's a little deceiving when you're out there looking at it, but gradually over, you know, from the south to the very north kind of point up there it really gets a little bit steeper, but as you gradually come down, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but it's about 5 to 6 feet that it gradually slopes down to Traceway. Mm-hmm. And once Rob's team really got into the specific grading through this, they started to realize how much site or earth would have to be kind of cut to make this work.
Yeah. Saw those numbers.
By raising it up, we helped the middle a little bit, and it also will create a little bit more natural feel instead of having retaining walls and cutting things. It also does save a good chunk of money by not having to haul all that earth off site.
The original elevation would have had the building kind of down into the ground at the north side of it.
Correct. Yeah. And really the impact was kind of like by the parking area. And as you move up, you know, and Rob's team's really doing a great job of, you know, of stormwater and management and getting them into the areas that we need to be. And that kind of lended to it as well. So a lot of overlying factors that kind of hit to it. And, you know, sometimes you don't develop these, you know, issues until you get a little bit down the road. So I think this was a really good solution. And I think a lot of good positive things came out of that as well, especially when this becomes an active building and active site, just kind of separating some of those traffic, I think really lends its hand on this kind of solution.
Yeah, and by comparison, our city library right out here is quite elevated along Lacey and Research, and on the north side of it, it's down in there. There's stairs going down to get to the entrance. So it looks,
Yeah.
it's a lot similar to that.
And maybe I might, if I could add a side note, if you're familiar, the Hatchery Hill project, we're looking for fill for the Hatchery Hill to bake. So what we're going to do is have the cut from the hub go to Hatchery Hill. So, we're kind of doing two projects with one, if you would.
Okay, what exactly is the Hatchery Hill project?
Well, the Hatchery Hill, if you remember, we were going to be doing some grading because it's so low and it's wet and we're not able to use it. So we're going
you're
to
talking about Hatchery Hill Park?
Hatchery Hill
Okay.
Park, right. So we're going to grab the fill from, or
Okay.
the cut from the hub, and then we'll have this as a drop-off spot, if you would, so that'll, get two projects done and hopefully bring some cost savings.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Let's see if anybody else first.
Okay, Patrick?
Mike and Rob, may we ask you some other questions not related to site setback and elevation and all?
Sure.
Okay. What we, I guess, are sort of calling the open area general play court with basketball, pickleball. The way you're designing it, and this is my interpretation, I may be wrong, we originally talked about refrigerated ice coils under the floor of that area, which we eliminated. But my understanding still was that that floor was somehow able to be flooded with water and then let winter freeze it. Is that still in the design as a wintertime skating rink?
Potentially.
we
So
had some
what
pre-meeting
we did,
discussion.
and previously, I think, if you remember, we also had a covered structure over
Yes.
the top of that,
Right.
and that really helped a lot. Part of that ice rink, and I think when we went through some budget, really kind of forming the budget and what it needs to be, that's when the ice rink went away, and then we replaced it with this is actually going to be an asphalt court. And when we started doing design again, we looked at, and the idea of the covered structure, potentially ice rink, who knows down the road, definitely covered structure could still come back in. And so we planned around that to allow that to happen.
Okay.
But going through our scenarios, we realized that, it was going to be tough to save. If that happened, it was going to be tough to save a concrete pad of what we had previously. So we went with asphalt, and if it does happen down the road, that will have to be demolished, and then you put in a new concrete structure along with the covered structure. So whether that could be, I think maybe I'll let Rob chime into that one, if that can be flooded and used for that. I don't think so, but I can let Rob chime in on that one.
Yeah, at the moment, skating is out. And what we found, we did a study kind of to look at the potential of adding a covered structure later. And at the end of the day, there's just too much collateral damage with the construction of that covered structure. If it was all concrete right now, that we went with asphalt, because generally speaking, that's not an exorbitant cost to put in an asphalt court, compared to if we did all reinforced concrete to prepare for what might not happen in the future. So if in the future that's revisited, it would be a remove and replace scenario, and then evaluate what sort of surfacing you'd want under that covered structure. But there's no good way to fit the covered structure in with the footing requirements and all that, as is.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next question. But on this part here, you are saying that, yes, we, and I think everybody else, eliminated the refrigerated coil ice skating rink, but you're saying that the way this has gone, the flood it with water and let winter freeze it has been eliminated also. And apparently you're also saying that concrete would have been more suitable for that. Asphalt is not really. So even winter water ice freezing for ice skating is out at this current time.
Yeah, probably at this point.
Okay. And then, yeah, my other question on the same thing was, the council removed the roof off of it, but I was kind of feeling that there was a possibility with future funding that the roof could be added, but you're saying this is being built with the idea of, no, it will essentially, as we would see it, never have a roof. The asphalt you're mentioning would have to be removed, footings would have to be put down, essentially demolish what is being built in this view and kind of rebuild it to add a roof later. In other words, this is not being built with, yeah, you come along next year, 2 years, and just add the roof on. Not that.
No.
Okay.
I mean, we looked at that, and when you start overlaying kind of what it would take to put in that covered structure, you're looking at damage to the existing surfacing, the court space, the sidewalks next to it, potentially some of the parking lot to mobilize to build that structure. So we found that the best option, if that is to come in the future, 5-10 years down the road, is it's removed.
I see.
And then maybe can salvage some of the base material and things like that. But by and large, that would be removed.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't want to put in the footings per se. You know, if this was maybe going to be something in 1 to 2 years, we might have been able to put some footings into there and kind of create that structure a little bit. But I think it was agreed that it was a cost that, you know, with the uncertainty, even though that's still there potentially for the covered structure, with the uncertainty, it was a cost that I think the project didn't need to accrue at this moment.
Okay.
I think that was the thought process behind it. And, you know, if the covered structure, you know, comes in back in a couple of years, you know, what we're trying to do is limit the amount of stuff that has to get removed and replaced. And that's, again, why we went to an asphalt surface, because that's, you know, quite a bit cheaper than going to a concrete surface at this point.
Okay, I understand, yeah. Okay, and then another question here. On page 32 of these engineering diagrams, it is the photometric site plan, and I see red lines drawn around here, at least on the screen, which I am trying to interpret that the red line is the general lit up area of the site inside of the red circle, sort of. It goes all over the place. Am I reading that part right?
Yeah, and that's a design development level one. We've already made some changes to that, but generally speaking, it's going to be an inwardly focused lighting plan.
Okay.
With discussions with city staff and things, there isn't a great desire to light the entirety of the site. So.
Okay. Well, my question is, as I'm looking at this, the open general play court area seems like it's outside of the red line there. So I'm wondering, is there some kind of lighting for that? Or as soon as it gets dark, it's not usable?
That was the approach that I think we were told to kind of go, is that we weren't lighting the asphalt, the basketball area. Now, what's also not on this photometrics, this is purely for kind of site lighting, but there's quite a bit of lighting that is on the building itself that doesn't show up in this plan.
Okay.
And that'll get rectified when we get there. And the intent of that building, well, we need it per code for all our exits out of the building, but also we want some of that to splash around the building. On the canopy in the back, we'll have night lights on there. So for security reasons, not all of them, but a couple of them, to make sure some of these spots are well lit during the evening.
Yeah.
But early on, to answer your question, the direction was not to light the basketball court.
Okay.
So when it does get dark, now there may be able to have some light spilling over for the one hoop to shoot over there, but not as a general notion to light the whole court.
Okay, so that sounds like it's sort of to discourage, let's say, evening after dark basketball use.
Potentially, yeah. Okay. Not sure about the sole reason of that, but it definitely would say that.
Well, and it's not going to be totally dark.
No,
like
not.
There'll be splash, and so people will be able to shoot hoops and things like that. It's not going to be.
It kind of depends on how bright it actually is, and I mean,
yeah,
if you can see where the basketball is, you
Street
you'll play.
lighting, and, yeah, there'll be plenty of splash on that.
And on the building, like you say, it's not on this, but like wall sconces or something like that around on the sides of the building.
Correct.
Street lighting as well. So there'll be some ambient light for sure.
Okay, all right.
Anything else? Go ahead, Katie.
I have one quick question. I like your alternate with the added ramp and the stairs at the front entry. I also like how you pointed out that it helps break that entry away from the sidewalk at the front. I was wondering if the stairs that face to the east, have you also looked at adding a second set that face to the south directly onto the sidewalk fronting the building, so that they would wrap around that corner?
Yeah, and are you thinking straight, for the east entry and then both go to the east and to the south off
And-
of that
Yep,
stoop?
and to the south,
Yeah.
just so it feels like you have a front entrance instead of having to
Yeah.
walk to the side.
We didn't look at it per se at this point, but I think that brings up a good point. I think it's easy enough to do that. Again, and the reason why we didn't come that way is because where we are sitting there, we might get too close to where that sidewalk really kind of flies by a little bit, and the future connection to any development to the east. But it surely could have one that comes off to the south. It should have the room to be able to do that.
One thing we talked about with city engineering too is we're trying to limit the amount of construction within that easement. So our building, for those who are unaware, comes right to the easement line.
Yeah.
Or there's a stormwater easement, or a utility easement outside of the setback.
Got it.
So the city does have interest in kind of minimizing constructed elements in that easement.
That's a good point.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion and seconded. It does not include the phrase to include the conditions of the Plan Commission. So to remedy, the motion was Sarah.
Can we add that as a friendly retroactively? Chris, would you agree to that with your second?
I see him shaking his head yes. So then just at this point, voting as it's added because the two, is that what you see it as?
So Sarah is expanding her motion.
Okay. I need my parliamentarian assistants to weigh in, so you got it added in by virtue of your comments. Okay. And Chris second. All right. So we are good, 6 ways to Sunday. And those in favor of the motion as stated?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank Mike.
And
Rob.
thank you both for attending.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. 6A is a discussion action item of the bicycle parking request mechanism. And let's save the motion and the et cetera to the end, because we're going to just discuss this, correct? We'll do that. So, Scott.
At the end of the day, what Fitchburg is requesting here, which seems to make sense, we're trying to do some additional bike parking out within the park system. So what this mechanism would do would allow for a method or an option for a resident to request, a bike rack at their specific park. And I think it really, the idea of as staff and in those kinds of things, we may not be aware of all the workings of each of the parks, and the residents would know that they go to the park, and boy, it'd be nice to have a bike rack, so they would request a bike rack at a specific park to help us place the bike racks that we're putting out in the park system.
Okay, I have a question or two. just referring to Mr. Arnold's letter, he talks about the funding for this year coming from unspent 2022 funds. Were those ARPA funds or unspent Parks Department funds?
Well, in actually, we did do there were unspent Park Department funds that were carried over, and actually we were able to purchase some bike racks this year. So those are bike racks that we've got locations for. So those will be taken care of this year, but this is really towards the future, that if there's additional locations that residents would request to have bike racks, this provides a opportunity for them to share that request with us.
Okay. And the only thing I thought of was that, this should be structured as a citizen request or suggestion, and it's nicely laid out in the email from Mr. Arnold. But this is a system that should accommodate staff and Parks Department input also, not only in placement, but prioritizing. So it doesn't simply come from a citizen request to an edict, but rather, Scott, your staff might have comments. There might be in some day disagreement of what's most important or where those funds are spent. So I just would like the staff as well as Parks Commission to be able to weigh in on final decisions if needed. Does that sound fair to everybody else, Patrick?
Right, I would thoroughly agree with that. I was thinking that, yes, someone could make a request, but yeah, it should be reviewed by the staff, by this commission in some way. I don't know if we necessarily have an agenda item where we vote on it, or at least a communication, or something where we could come in, sort of review and say, yes, we agree at least.
Yeah, well, and I'm all right with, I'm all right, I agree with what you're saying. And I just think that Scott has to be able to manage funds and materials and he may some days or sometimes, or whoever, our Parks Director may see it differently than the citizen making the request. So we have to have a way of who's the final say.
Well, and I think what this is going to do is just provide a process for someone to make a request, and then that'll come before the Park Commission, and staff will review it, and I would bring it back to the Park Commission for final approval and those kinds of things. So this just really, I think, advertises to the community that, hey, are you interested in a bike rack at your park? Let us know about it, and we'll take a look at it and see if it makes sense, financially and those other types of priorities and things like that.
I have one other question for you, and then I see Heidi has a question as well. When we're talking bike racks these days, is it something that's installed in concrete, or is it a freestanding that can be anchored?
No, it would be on a concrete slab that is anchored to the concrete slab.
Okay. And Heidi, go ahead.
Well, so I have no issue with the theory behind this. I mean, I think it's important for the public to be able to request these things. But my question is, wouldn't the simple formal process be where they come to the Park Commission and bring that up either during public comments to get put on a future agenda, or approach Scott or one of the Park Commission members to have it put on a future agenda? I'm not exactly sure what other formal way, if we need one more step, I'm just not sure what that would be.
I think that's a good suggestion, just like a new event in a park or whatever it might be. I might ask the applicant to appear before the Park Commission and, give rationale, and staff is in agreement, and we go for it, kind of thing. So I think that's all good process.
Okay, does that, Heidi, and that comports with what you're suggesting, that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know exactly what Mr. Arnold is asking. What does he suggest, that there's an application that gets submitted to Scott or whoever, and then it goes forward from there?
I guess that's exactly it, Heidi. It's a process for residents to request a bike rack in their neighborhood park. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is just the process in which people can request that.
So it's just basically sort of, I guess for lack of a better word, streamlining the process so that it's consistent with other requests that may be coming through.
Sure, I think just in procedure that it's, it's not someone requests it to me and then I go out and go ahead and do it. It just formalizes that, along with providing an opportunity, as I mentioned, for residents to request a bike rack.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I see you have a question, and then Katie after that.
Yeah, Scott, does Fitchburg have like a city standard bike rack model or style?
We do, which was recommended by Bike Fitchburg, and those are the bike racks that we're putting out there. Yes, we've got a standard.
Okay. And I can't remember what the bike racks I've seen around look like. Are they the type that's linked together on sort of a track that contains several stations in one, or are they individual, U-shaped racks, something like that?
They're individual U racks.
Okay, so
Hugo Jamestown is one park we have them.
Okay, so you have the flexibility of installing anywhere from 1 to 100 at any location because they're not several stations combined.
Correct.
Okay, so then somewhere in the process, we need to know the number of bikes that would be requested at each location. So that should just be, we should probably just note that as part of the process or part of the form or application or whatever the resident's going to submit. And then also I would say if it's going to be anchored in concrete, we would need to know whether or not it's going on existing concrete or if a new slab needs to be poured. And then that, we know the square footage that we needed based on the number of bike racks suggested. So you can kind of sort of extrapolate a rough cost for this. If we just assign us cost per rack, per square foot of concrete, et cetera, even if it's, we know it's not going to be firm, but just a ballpark idea so that if or when it does make it to Parks Commission or whoever, we know, the dollar amount associated with it. And then I would also say maybe the first step is just a staff review. Because somebody may request something that's not feasible for obvious reasons, that staff would be able to just say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do this here. Try somewhere else, so it doesn't make it all the way to us to, the person who submits this application doesn't wait forever for it to make it to Parks Commission, for it to be like, oh no, this isn't even possible for reason XYZ. So I would just say, encourage staff review initially, because if we don't have to see it, no need for them to wait that long.
That sounds fair. And maybe just clarification, they bolt on to the slab, Chris. They're not
right.
Not in.
Surface mount.
Surface mount, right. Thanks.
Yeah.
And Katie, go ahead.
To build on the last two comments, both from Heidi and from Chris, I was going to say that I can see the advantages of having a form for exactly the reasons that Chris just described. If we have a form, then people know we need, the name of the park, a description of where it's going, how many bike racks they're looking at. Does the person requesting them think that there's already existing concrete that could be used, or would it need to be a new spot? And that both gives staff a way to track the information and hopefully limits the number of emails back and forth with the requesters to get all of the answers.
Thank you. All very good suggestions. Patrick?
Yeah, and I think we're all going the same direction on this too, because I see this. Well, the one thing you mentioned, if there was a disagreement of staff says one thing and the requester sees it a different way or something, that the Park Commission should probably be the one to make the final decision on it, or listen to the applicant coming here. It sounds like this would be, a form, but not a multi-page complicated form, but more formal than, using those request slips at the back counter right there. And, the usual council 3 minutes to make your pitch, and then, it's more than that. But in the last paragraph, or bottom of the page anyway, where Steve writes here, it is our hope that a simple request system could be in place January, February. So simple enough that it can be moved along and available and ready to go quick, and start working on this. For all we know, maybe there's some people or the Bike Fitchburg or such who have some sites in mind already, and they're itching to fill out the form whenever we print one.
Okay, so if there are no other comments, then we will vote. Wait, Patrick?
Just one comment. I do like the idea that this is based on citizen request. I like that better than, let's say, staff going out and looking around and figuring out, maybe we need a bike rack here, maybe we need one there, but this place doesn't need it. I like it much better that the citizens would be the one requesting. And yes, staff would review, Park Commission would review, give our approval, something like that, sort of quick and easy. But I like citizen request methods.
I do too. I also do think, though, that sometimes staff are the best to observe that there's 14 bikes always piled on top of each other near a certain baseball field. So if they see it, they should be welcome to participate. Okay,
Fill out a form.
that's right. Direct them to the form. Okay, so we would need a motion.
And if I might,
ahead.
Sue,
Yeah.
the motion just that Park Commission is good with the process that Steve outlined with all the other comments, and then I can get working on it right away instead of coming back with you reviewing what I come up with and all of that kind of stuff.
I'll make the motion that the Park Commission is favorable of the Steve Arnold and Bike Fitchburg request and favors the staff to go ahead with this, work out some simple request system. And do we need to do some kind of approval when it's ready to go?
Well, I think if you trust staff, Steve gave a good outline. I heard what staff is recommending, so I would go ahead and make the form, and I can certainly bring it back to the Park Commission in February and for final.
I guess what I'll include in my motion is come up with something, see if Bike Fitchburg has a first request, run it through, give it to us, and we'll see if it looks good. And if we have to adjust it there, we can do so. Otherwise, go ahead.
Okay, and Christopher.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do we need a motion now if we are just generally in agreement that we like the idea and Scott and staff develops a process and a form, et cetera, and then we just vote to approve it when we see that? That's the action.
It's more of a motion of allowing staff to move ahead with it.
So Scott, you would like the motion now?
Could certainly do it either way, but I think the idea of, okay, Scott, you've got our go-ahead to go ahead and develop it and then bring it back and we'll get final approval.
I would say, the way I'm thinking
Or I
of,
could just-
if we're keeping this as simple as possible, see if there's a request that someone wants to file, and whatever you put together, put the request in it, try and run it through the system. We'll see if there's any hitches in what we see as the first request comes through. Does that sound reasonable?
Well, I'm thinking I'll just come up with the process and make sure that everyone seems to be okay with the process that we've developed, and then we'll, when that first request comes in, then we'll see what kind of hiccups there might be. It's pretty basic, right? They request how many they, it's pretty basic stuff. I don't think it has.
And that's what I'm getting at is the same as Steve is asking here, quick and simple, something to just get it moving, not,
right. But what
6 month review.
what I'm hearing is I should bring it back to the Park Commission in February for just final look at, and
Okay.
and then we'll
To read.
and whether we need a motion to do that or not, I guess.
Well, we're giving you the go-ahead motion from the Park Commission to go ahead, and we'll review in February.
Okay, so we're going to go with a motion. So we look, and that's been provided. A second?
I'll second.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. And then for communication, Scott, you can take us through these?
And the first one is Southdale Park update. I did want to, I know this is an item that's on the, future agenda item, so I definitely wanted to keep the Park Commission appraised of the work that's going on in Southdale Park. I just would remind the Park Commission that in 2023, we've got within a CIP, we've got a Park ID sign, and we also have the basketball court renovation. And then in 2024, we've got some additional playground. And then actually in 2024, additional shelter with restrooms, but there's only $75,000 in that CIP. So we might have to adjust that. Along with, there is a community garden in Southdale, so we'll be, I've got the contact, so when we get going with the, our community garden update process will include those residents at Southdale and their community gardens. And I know Anna is working on, evaluation of ash trees and those kinds of things. So those are the things. And actually with snow removal, we did have some snow, so Jordan was able to activate the snow removal process for Southdale. So that's a bit of an update on what's going to be happening in Southdale. Stoner Prairie Park Plan, I did include in your packet. I'm looking to have the open house public meeting on February 8th. And if everyone's good with that, I know Sue has offered and she has provided some reconnaissance for me to find the contacts and all of that to get the information out. Another suggestion that Sue did have, which is a great one to have within, the public announcement or somehow have a link to the existing plan so that people could take a look at that. So if that's all good with you folks, I'll get going on getting that put together. I did include for your information projects for 2023, which kind of gives you a list of the things that we're going to be working on in this year. I did want to give you an update on the Park and Open Space Plan update. The Planning Department is now able to get going with that project again, so
Scott?
that's a good
Scott?
go ahead. Yes?
You kind of zipped by the 2023 projects awful fast.
Yep. You have question? Yep. I just provided a list of the
Yeah.
projects. I don't know if you've got questions on that. Certainly I'll take any questions, but that's kind of a list of the things that are on our docket for 2023.
You have a question, Patrick?
So the Hatchery Hill Park grading is related to this hub excavation and the fill going there that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, that's
Okay.
that's
Right.
part of it.
I take it the Hugo Jamestown outfield fence, the outfield fence has not been removed yet. That's put off till better weather now?
That's on the list, right?
Yeah. McGaw tree removal, what is that?
That's the locust, the honey that we haven't gotten to yet.
How are you going to?
Or not the locust, yeah, the
Black
hazard
locust.
trees. Remember those hazard trees, black locust trees?
How are you going to do that?
As was approved by the park, we're going to go in and remove them.
Okay, that maybe needs more discussion, especially with the property owner.
We've reached out to the property owner, so we've got a plan on how we're going to do that.
Sunnyside Park drinking fountain, that didn't get any farther than the two pipes sticking out of the ground, right?
It's right.
And electric.
And the
from
electric, yep,
over to there, but that was the end of it right there, right, so far?
correct.
The pickleball court windscreens and other improvements, that is in the western edition of McGaw Park pickleball courts.
That's in Fahey Fields, yep.
Yeah, it's not Fahey Fields, it's the western addition to McGaw Park. So it has windscreens like all the way around it. Are you adding more or what?
Well, if you look close at it, they're every other slat,
Yes,
so
I've
we're
seen
going to
that.
put them in every slat.
A lot of it is every other, and then on some corners, especially the upwind, it's every one.
Yep, and that was our sample, and we're looking to do the same for the whole.
So it's
whole
going to
thing.
fill in every slot then, all the
Correct.
way around?
Correct.
Okay, just so then I'll comment on that. I think it would be useful to not have those windscreen slats in the gates, the entrance gates.
What, and why?
So you can see through the gate. I mean, the fence all the way around, sure, but the gate, it seems like you're kind of blocking by
Well,
closing off the gate. It's more like a solid door rather than you can see through it, and
Well, you can.
it's just
you
my
can,
impression looking at it, walking by.
You
and all.
can see through there.
Well, yeah,
Are you asking or remarking sort of as a hazard, not opening the gate and smacking it into somebody, or?
it just seems like it would be better if the gate part, whatever's
It's a
3-4 feet wide, doesn't have the same windscreen slats in it. So you can see in better, and for one thing, see if there's an open court in there to play on, or if somebody's standing right on the other side of the gate, yes, you can see them. But to kind of see what's going on in the whole court area, it seems like having the slats not in the 4 gates would be preferable. My comment, standing there looking at it.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll take your comments under.
it seems like a reasonable request. There might be safety reasons, et cetera, to
Could
want
he
to be able to
do
peek.
every other slat in the gates to start?
Maybe. I kind of think I just take them out. I don't think it's going to let a tornado wind tunnel go through the gate area just because it doesn't have slats in it. My view would be to take the slats out of the 4 gates. And, it's got a bunch of them in there. I'm not sure if they go all the way around. I know there's some places where every link is filled in, and then others where every other link is filled in. So it obviously can be added, subtracted, moved, whatever.
Very good.
Okay. I have some comments about a few things, but I'll just wait till you've gone through all your, but I see Heidi has a question or comment.
Sure.
Sorry, I couldn't get it off of mute. Just sort of an observation. In the Stoner Prairie Park Master Plan flyer, I'm wondering if it should say, as the implementation of this plan is undertaken, as opposed to the implantation of this plan.
Good catch. Yeah, no, you're right, Katie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah, it's got implementation in the middle and then implantation later.
Katie won the prize.
Yeah.
Or Heidi, I'm sorry.
And,
Thanks,
okay,
Thanks, Heidi.
go ahead now, Scott. You were,
Park and open space plan. I mentioned that. Terra Vesa Ag Park plan update. I actually met with Rob today. He's got a couple different options. We're going to get those cleaned up, and then actually have a combination public meeting, park commission meeting, to gather comments from everybody, and then eventually come to the park commission with a final recommendation. Community gardens, as I mentioned, we're going to send out. I think we're going to work on a Google survey, if you would, to find out, if people are coming back and all of those kinds of things. But I did want to kind of give reference to how many current plots we do have out in the park system. So that's in the agenda comments. I provided the number of garden plats that we have. We've got actually 17 at Hugo Jamestown, 39 in Swan Creek, 13 in Quarry Hill, 11 in Briarwood, and I don't know exactly how many are in Southdale. So good share of garden plots.
Southdale is a, new community garden?
Yep, they actually have an existing one in Southdale Park.
Okay.
Tree preservation ordinance update. that continues through the approval process. The Plan Commission will be looking at it on the 17th of January. Resource Conservation on February 13th. They took the Park Commission's recommendation, and then Committee of the Whole on February 22nd. So they're making the rounds with that ordinance, if you would.
Okay, so, go ahead, Patrick, and then I'll.
As another, did you want to ask
No,
about
you
some
go
of
ahead.
these things?
No, go ahead.
Well, I want to sort of add on a letter H communication thing, so go ahead with all the other
Okay,
first.
all right. Here is, I wrote some notes on these varying things, and I'll just go backwards here. From G, on the tree preservation ordinance dates that Scott just gave, I hope each of us will consider taking a little bit of time to send your personal comments to these groups before they meet. Because if they take the time to look at our minutes, it doesn't incorporate the very thoughtful comments that each of you presented at the time when we talked to the Tree Advisory Committee last month. So whatever, if you'd like to, that'd be appreciated, I think, by the Tree Advisory Committee, sort of as a backup. And then on the Parks and Open Space update, that was item D in this section, that was just a few months ago, and Scott had provided in our agenda packet just a month or several months ago, what did you call it, the red line? So if you want to look at that and see if everything you thought you commented on is in there, because now Scott's telling us it's going to our new staff. I happened to see one thing that I think I mentioned that didn't get in there, so I'm going to try and take a closer look. But if you want to take the time and look, then that saves doubling back on the time again. And on the Stoner Prairie, I think everything was mentioned. I had some questions, but then I think Scott covered all that. And then on the Southdale Park update, you had Scott described the years that things are going on. And you mentioned the shelter with restrooms. Question I have, Scott, is there water stubbed into the shelter right now? That's always such the expensive part of the big expense is sewer and water.
There is currently water. They've got a couple spray amenities and a drinking fountain there, actually. But certainly that's a good point, that if it is decided to put some kind of a bathroom facility, we'd have to evaluate the water that's currently there, and there may be some additional costs to get a correct water service in there and those kinds of things. So,
because I thought you also told me that the community garden had a water source, which is rare and nice. You know,
which is where?
Rare.
Yep.
To not run hoses hundreds of feet.
Yeah, no, it's set up pretty good.
Yeah. And so the thing that I still want to discuss next month, we'll put it on the agenda. Anything anyone else wants to about Southdale Park is the name, and discuss why and why not. There's arguments to be had, whether that name, whether someone's Heidi, I think we're.
I'm sorry, that was my dog. I didn't realize I was off mute. I'm sorry.
Can we see the dog?
So anyway, it'll be on there for next month. And the other thing, Scott, I had a question about is if when we do that, if we can look, if maybe someone from planning can help find the original plat. Because when Heidi and I went there, there's a paved path that goes up the hill towards the belt line. And it's got switchbacks, and then it goes what seems to be directly through private property on each side up to that road or service road. And I don't know how much of that is that encompassed in what we think of as the park boundaries, or does it stray into something else.
No, that's, well, I can definitely, I know there's a path that meanders and goes to the street, but I think that's part of Southdale Park.
Right, it's just the tail end of it. You get to the top of the hill, and then it's a straight shot out, and again, it may belonged to Town of Madison and dedicate as part of the park, but it goes between two private properties, straight out. So, I mean, obviously, it was installed and probably plowed, so I'm just curious to make sure it's all shown on our boundaries.
Sure.
And so is there anyone else who had, Patrick, you wanted to say something
I want
else?
to make sure everybody has covered these others.
Oh, looks like you're going
Okay.
there.
Yeah, something that I had asked Scott in email, because I saw that I'll just say the city is purchasing a new mower, but retaining the earlier mower rather than trade it in. So we will have 3 mowers. The part that I was questioning, and I asked, I thought you were going to put this on our agenda, or at least a communication right here. Apparently, see, when it was referred out from council, it was referred to Public Works to review it and approve it, and to Finance, which is obvious, to review it and approve it. And I asked at the time of our alder to ask that it be referred to Parks, because I thought, well, shouldn't we have some say-so on, or at least an opportunity to hear it and ask questions and such about purchasing a new mower? And as I am understanding this, and then you can correct me, this, as I seem to be understanding it from what you wrote back to me, this is purchased with Public Works funds, not Parks funds, so they're the ones that approve it, and I don't think we, as I remember, even saw this in the CIP when we reviewed that earlier last year.
You know, at the end of the day, the Public Works, the Parks Department is a customer of the Public Works Department. So the Public Works Department is responsible for the maintenance of the parks, and they in turn purchase the equipment and all the things that they need in order to provide that service to the Parks Department. So I don't get involved with how they perform their duties and get their jobs done and those kinds of things. It is my understanding, though, that, you know, the 16-foot mower is pretty expensive. It was $160,000. But the idea of keeping a third one is when we're in full, when park maintenance is in full operation during the summer, they'll have a full-time crew person on a 16-foot mower and then a seasonal person on a 16-foot mower, and it really puts them back if one of those mowers is down. So what this will do will provide that third, you know, an additional option, along with, you know, if it's in the spring, it'll allow them, as I understand, to potentially put 3 16-foot mowers out into the system to get caught up, if you would. And as I'm understanding, it's about they would receive about $20,000 in trade-in for that third 16-foot mower. So the thought is that it's, you know, for the $20,000, it would behoove, you know, park maintenance to retain that mower.
Yeah, and I agreed with that. It's, you know, rather than trade it in and only get 20,000, just keep the thing and use it as a backup, like you're saying. So I agree with all that logic and everything. I just had some questions kind of on the referral. It seems like Park Commission should, as some way along the way, at least hear about this.
Park maintenance isn't in our lane, Patrick. Well,
your operators of it are the park staff, right?
They're all employees of the Public Works Department under the city engineer. I, as the Parks Director, am a customer of that maintenance operation. I certainly work day to day with Joran, but I'm not going to tell them how they get the stuff that I need them to get done. They do that.
Yeah, well, it just seemed a little odd to me that Public Works is deciding, I guess, that the Parks Department needs a new mower. The previous mower that was purchased was $130,000.
Yeah.
This one, I don't
160.
remember, 160. Yeah, the price goes up.
Yeah.
it's kind of like, if they are deciding, then what if they say, well, you guys just don't need another mower, and they say no or something? It seems like we should have some part in this.
I allowed the park maintenance supervisor and I allow the engineering department to determine how they best can provide the service to the Parks Department to get the work done.
Okay, and just a little more on the whole operational side of it. I believe in the summer there's 6 staff plus the supervisor, 7 total. And I'm just kind of curious that you have another person. Let's say if you send out 3 16-foot mowers, plus you have 6-foot mowers, that you've got people who are available to run the mowers.
I don't. The Public Works Department.
Okay.
They've got 4 seasonal and I think up to 4 or 5 full-time, so they've got 9. I think at this point they've got 9 employees.
Okay,
during the summer.
I'm aware of the whole back thing when Public Works was completely separate crew from Parks.
Yes.
And then they were combined, and yes, as you say, Parks is a customer of Public Works. You share equipment. The 2 groups help each other, but it still seems inoperational to this day. The Parks crews work in the park, or, the list of the names that are on your staff work on park stuff. The Public Works work on street stuff and things like that. They still kind of seem quite a bit separate in actual day-to-day operation.
They're not my staff, no.
Okay. I'm trying to just get this clear. There's enough people to run 3 mowers.
Oh, yeah.
For one thing.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
and there's an organizational chart too. It's not just Scott telling us this. It's there.
There's Mark Hodel for a Parks Public Works supervisor. There's Joran Friedland for a Parks supervisor.
And their names,
for that crew.
But all their names fall under the Public Works in the
Department of Public
organizational chart.
Works, right.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
Scott's got one name underneath, right? Anna
in the rec department, right?
I'm thinking just Parks Park, but okay.
But I work day to day.
Well, I know you do.
Joran,
See, that's my point. Is you're working day to day with Joran, just like you're working with Anna and Chad and such. And yes, there's this hierarchical. Joran sort of technically reports to the Public Works director in this building, Bill Balke, who is retiring, I think, next week. But Joran is still in close communication with you on things.
We work on day to day, certainly, with ball diamonds and those. But if there's big decisions, I talk to the director of Public Works to say, hey, is it okay if I talk to your supervisor about doing this kind of project? Currently, and that may change, with the new Public Works director, that relationship may change. But currently, the current director of Public Works is okay with me working day to day with Joran and the operations of, the day-to-day operations of the maintenance of the parks. And that might change.
Okay.
But again, it's and really we made that change way back when. I remember when I tried to buy a piece of equipment and it didn't go anywhere. So we're fortunate now that all of that equipment goes through Public Works, and we're pretty successful in getting that for the staff.
So as it currently works annually, you're buying things like playground equipment that gets installed, ball field stuff that gets installed, tennis, volleyball, whatever, pickleball things that get installed, but the equipment that goes around, driving around, that's Public Works equipment. Would you? That sound good?
That sounds fair.
Okay.
That sounds fair.
Because we do see that in our CIP.
Okay. And Heidi, I think you had a question. Do you still have a question?
No, that's okay. I'm good. I figured it out. Thank you.
Okay.
A little more. I am curious, because I've had questions come to me from people. Are there set routes that, especially the 16-foot mowers, use, of how they take off every Monday, so on, around Tuesday, out and around Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Is there a set route that Joran has organized for where the drivers and each piece of equipment goes out each day of the week, and then the next week they repeat?
Is right.
I would be interested in seeing that, because
then go to
Talk to
go to the Board of Public
Works.
Works and see if they'll give it to you.
Okay.
What's
ask-
your interest in it, Patrick? Let me help you. What are you interested in?
I don't.
They definitely have a route in I don't know what you're trying to get at.
I don't want to come down too much on them, and that is what this is going to sound like. But I'm since you asked,
Yep.
and I will answer. People have said to me they see a mower go into a park on the same day, go into the park, come out of the park, then go back into the park, then come out of the park, and then later in the week, go back into the park and come out. I have not exactly seen that myself, but where my house is, I don't see that vehicular traffic.
Well, and
But that's what they're saying, so I don't know, and I'm
Have
wondering
them-
what's
have
the
them-
route, how do they go around and
have
cover the
them
whole city?
have them reach out to me, Patrick, and I'll talk with them.
Okay.
Yeah, I trust that they, as professionals, are
I would think so, yes.
yeah. So
I think on the previous mower that was traded in a couple of years ago or something like that, through Wisconsin Surplus, I believe. I think a lot of it was wear and tear on the tires from just driving on the road to get from one park to another. So the whole play of the idea is minimizing the road travel, which wear down these tires because they're maybe not meant to be on the road so much.
They trailer the 6-foot mowers, but they do not trailer the
Right, I know.
16-foot mowers.
Which means people see the 16-foot mowers driving down the road.
Right, they may.
It's another comment that I heard.
Yeah,
So it's questions that I'm raising here.
sure.
Okay.
Good.
And so we are now on to staff reports. Scott?
I've got a staff report there. I did want to share with the Park Commission a little news. In regards to attendance to Park Commission meetings in 2022, there's a total of 84 opportunities for Park Commission members to attend the Park Commission meetings, and I'm here to report that there were. How many misses do you think there were during the course of 2022? Of the 84, how many?
10.
7.
5.
Oh.
5. 93% attendance for the Park Commission members.
Okay.
That's great.
Applaud for us.
That is good. That's good.
Your 84, is that 7 members, including the alder, for the 12 meetings?
Times 12.
Okay.
You're
Well, where'd you get 84 meetings? I don't know.
you're good.
Well, back in the day, 93% was an A, the school I went to, so.
No.
Great inflation, who knows, but that was you just made your A.
So I wanted to share that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Future agenda items. We're going to talk about Southdale Park.
Along with the bike rack request.
Yeah.
They'll be on there.
Oh, one thing.
And?
You mentioned in the communication there, but I'll mention it here as future agenda item. You mentioned about Southdale and renaming it. You are aware, or hopefully everyone saw I think at least 2-page email from Jay Allen, the alder of District 3, which Southdale is in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm going to backtrack because we were talking, you mentioned Alder, that when you're ready to send something out to the neighborhoods about Stoner Prairie Park, do you normally, for something like that, give an extra little email or something to those alders?
I'll send it to the whole council and the
council?
whole Park Commission. Yeah.
Sure, okay, so they'll see it, I mean.
Yep, they'll see it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're really swamped. I can't imagine what it's like to have to read everything that they're supposed to read, so.
Yeah, your emails go to the entire park department, park commission, mayor, administrator.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Whoever's on
You
those
leave
lists.
anybody out.
all right. Another thing I would like people's opinion about is for future agenda items, if Heidi and I had just informally visited some parks, and it was just good for me to become familiar with the parks, and Heidi being new. What people think about picking a park or two to just have on our agenda each month for all of us to, whether we look at a satellite image or do a park visit, and it's an opportunity to specifically say, we're talking about these 2 parks this month, or this 1 park a month.
Why wouldn't you ask your staff?
Is that,
Because Jim ended up saying. Personally, I like the idea. I think that, I don't know if we need to visit them, but I think it would be important, like you said, maybe to have an aerial view or a Google view, maybe with a list of the amenities. And maybe once a year, we sort of have an outing, obviously in the summertime, where we visit 2 or 3 parks as a group, either those that are struggling or those that need a lot of work or something like that, and just sort of put our heads together that way. Just a thought.
That's been done in the past.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And certainly we kind of target the parks that there's activities going on and, projects and all of, and I will, offer anytime if anyone, I've got like a 1 hour and a 2 hour park tour that's available for anyone that's interested. Just reach out to me, and we can take a cruise around, that's for sure. But I could, to Heidi's point, the idea of, just doing a block of neighborhood parks or whatever it might be. I know Dakota with the Park and Open Space Plan update is doing, we've got a drone now, so the idea of going out and doing drone footage and including that in the park and, in the web page to kind of take a look at it. And I, certainly when we have a specific park that we're talking about on the agenda, the idea just, it'd be cool to, hey, here's the drone, here's the park, and here's all this kind of stuff. Just because it is, there's enough of them out there. That's for sure. So
Yeah, that sounds useful to fly a drone over a park or something, and maybe show us a video.
and we would probably start with the community, the parks that are rentable, because that typically, a resident or somebody might be looking at, hey, I'd like to rent a park, and they, could click on the link and then see a little overhead view of the park itself. But, and maybe that would be the process I go through, do the community parks, the area parks, and just kind of give the park commission a quick cursory view of or update of each of those parks.
If we have a heads up at one meeting that on the next meeting we have something coming up on the agenda or such, in other words, a heads up of a particular park, and I would mention Stoner Prairie as an example because of all of the planning for Stoner Prairie that's been going on, then during the next time before the meeting that we could, see if we have a chance to stop by and look at it. Back in the summer, I did go to Stoner Prairie Park and walked all around in there because I really wanted a right directly in front of me view of it, and it was very useful, very enlightening. I will mention, just for your amusement, there was one back several years ago of McGaw Park to look at some tree things, and it was on December 7th. It was freezing, bitter cold, and we were walking around in the park there looking at some tree things, and then we came to the shelter to get some more briefing from Scott Hendel, who was sitting in the park shelter with an electric heater going inside it. You were so, oh, absolutely. We were freezing and stepped into the shelter, and you're sitting there in a chair with an electric heater going. That was December 7th.
well, I'm going to do,
So no winter
We'll
tours.
come up with some, right. I mean, people can decide whether they want to get their kids in snowshoes and walk around in winter, but we'll try to come up with some kind of a process to start doing some review.
Well, and I'm up for a park tour. We'd start at like 4 or whatever, and they've got a vehicle that we can get the whole park commission in, and whoever wants to make it, we can cruise around, just take a look at stuff. So I appreciate that. That's
Oh, okay.
if
Party
that can
bus?
that gets you out
wait a
there
minute.
in the park.
Party
big-
bus?
Like a picnic.
Park system,
That big 12-passenger van?
right?
That
right.
thing was really rough riding in the back end of it. I mean,
Get
just
there-
like right in the
put you
back
there.
of the dump.
Then get there early.
The
We
one in
digress.
McGaw Park, Tara Thyme was the chair at that time.
Who was?
Tara Thyme. It happened.
Okay, I'm going to check with her.
Way to take,
Okay, so we are, we're close. The next two meetings, February 2nd, March 2nd, and now a motion to adjourn. I move to adjournment. Second?
Second.
Nobody wants to.
That was Heidi. Yep. Those in favor?
Aye.
I.
Any opposed?
I have 7:20.
7:20, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.